Rome, the city more than any other that testifies to a rich historical past, as well as being a treasure chest of artistic masterworks, representing the fullest and unrivaled expression of human achievement. Our first view is of the majestic Piazza Venezia, situated in the very heart of the city. The piazza is dominated by the Vittoriano, a colossal monument dedicated to King Vittorio Emanuele II to celebrate the unification of Italy. The piazza takes its name from Palazzo Venezia, an austere building in the early Renaissance style, the former residence of the Venetian ambassador to the Vatican. Behind the Vittoriano monument, we see the Campidoglio, the smallest of the 7 hills of Rome, but also the one most steeped in history. We climb the flight of steps up to the Piazza del Campidoglio, designed by Michelangelo, who managed to create a harmonious and imposing effect in a relatively small space. In the middle of the piazza stands the famous equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, a copy of the original, which is now in the entrance hall to the Capitoline Museum, one of the 2 buildings flanking the piazza. Facing it is the Palazzo dei Conservatori, which has the largest collection of ancient sculpture in the world, including the she-wolf, an Etruscan work dating from the 6th century BC, the legendary symbol of Rome and its origins. From the terrace behind the Palazzo Senatorio, we get a magnificent view of the Roman Forum, the immense piazza of ancient Rome, which was the hub of all its activities for 1,000 years, and which has always been considered the cradle of Roman civilization and of the Western world. The Curia, seat of the Council of Elders, in other words the Senate, was found by Tullo Ostilio, the 3rd king of Rome, and has been rebuilt many times. Numa Pompilio, the 2nd king of Rome, built the Temple of Vesta and founded the Order of the Vestal Virgins, whose task was to keep the sacred flame burning, the symbol of the Roman state. The priestesses of the order were highly respected and could only leave the order after 30 years of service. If a priestess broke her vow of chastity or let the sacred flame go out, she was condemned to death by being buried alive. During the early years of the Republic, the Temple of Saturn was built to house the state treasury. Another temple was dedicated to the divine twins Castor and Pollux, brothers of Helen of Troy. During the time of the Republic, the first basilicas were erected. In spite of their name, they were not religious buildings, but places for meetings and assemblies, for trading, and even for court proceedings. The great triumphal arch of Septimius Severus is well preserved. Even during the time of Julius Caesar, the old Forum was not big enough for a city that was growing so rapidly. So Caesar, Augustus, Nerva and Trajan created other areas in order to enlarge the main Forum, the heart of Rome's civic, political and commercial life. Trajan's Forum, dating from 110 AD, was the last and the greatest of the imperial forums. Trajan's Column was erected to celebrate his victorious campaign in Dacia, present-day Romania. Massive Flavian Amphitheatre, or Colosseum, is the largest building from ancient Rome. It was begun by Vespasian in 72 AD and completed by his son Titus 8 years later. This huge amphitheatre could hold about 50,000 spectators, who were protected from the sun by the velarium, a vast canvas awning open in the middle, covering the upper tiers of seats. The Colosseum was used mainly for fights between gladiators and wild animals, against a backdrop of elaborate scenery. Under Trajan, 10,000 gladiators fought in the Colosseum and 11,000 wild animals were killed there. On one side of the amphitheatre stands the imposing Arch of Constantine. The Senate dedicated it to the emperor in 315 AD to celebrate the definitive victory over Maxentius at the Battle of Ponte Milvio. The valley between the Palatine and the Aventine Hills is the site of the Circus Maximus, the largest stadium for chariot racing in the Roman world. Its tiered seats could hold 250,000 spectators. This was also a place where Christian martyrs died. Their bodies were buried in the catacombs outside the city along the Via Appia. This road leaves Rome through the Porta Appia, also known as the Porta di San Sebastiano, the largest and best preserved gate in the city walls, known as the Mura Aureliane, built around 270 BC. Today it is possible to visit some of the catacombs along the Via Appia. The oldest are the catacombs of San Callisto, which are on various levels underground, like all the others, forming an intricate maze. The catacombs of Saint Sebastian, the only Christian cemetery which has remained accessible, were the most venerated in Rome. Continuing along the Via Appia, we come to the famous sepulchre of Cecilia Metella, overlooking the Roman countryside. The triumph of Christianity over paganism is represented by San Giovanni in Laterano, the Cathedral of Rome, which the Emperor Constantine had built on property belonging to the Lateran family. The majestic interior was laid out by Borromini in 1650 in the Baroque style. But the massive statues of the apostles, done by Bernini's pupils, are almost too heavy. Another of Rome's four major basilicas is San Paolo fuori le mura, St. Paul's without the walls, the largest after St. Peter's. A statue of St. Paul stands at the fine entrance, which has 4 doors. The interior is grandiose and solemn. 4 rows of granite columns divide the basilica into 5 naves. The splendid coffered ceiling is decorated with elaborate gilded reliefs. At the center is the emblem of Pope Pius IX. Another basilica is Santa Maria Maggiore. Legend has it that this church stands on the site of a miraculous snowfall in August 356. The church was consecrated by Pope Sixtus III in 431. The interior still has much of its original appearance, with its 12th century flooring, elaborate mosaics, and a 16th century wooden ceiling, which was gilded, so the story goes, with the first gold from the Americas. There is another wonderful view of Rome from the top of the Capitoline Hill. In the middle of the piazza stands the statue of Giuseppe Garibaldi, the driving force behind Italian unification. On a terrace a little further down the hill, there is the Fontana dell'Acqua Paola, dedicated to Pope Paul V of the Borghese family. He had it built in 1612 to mark the restoration of Trajan's aqueduct, which resolved the dramatic water shortage that afflicted the city in the Middle Ages. Fountains became essential decorative elements for the parks surrounding noble residences. The best example of this fashion can be seen at Villa d'Este in Tivoli, a marvellous country house designed by the architect Piero Ligorio for the Cardinal Ippolito d'Este in the mid-16th century. The vast garden has a number of fantastic fountains with hundreds of water jets set amongst flower beds and paths, creating a striking and evocative scene. However, the elaborate Trevi fountain is the peak achievement in the construction of Roman fountains. Designed by Nicola Salvi in the early 18th century, the composition brings together architectural and natural features in a richly spectacular scene. One of the city's finest squares is Piazza della Repubblica. In the middle is the beautiful Fountain of the Naiads, a large circular basin flanked by 4 bronze groups of mythological marine creatures. The Villa Borghese and its estate, which once belonged to the Borghese family, is the best known public park in Rome. The villa itself houses an important museum and art gallery, the Galleria Borghese, one of the finest private collections in the world. Masterpieces include the celebrated statue of Paolina Bonaparte, Napoleon's sister. This work by Antonio Canova is a fine example of the neoclassical style. Another famous work by Bernini is the statue of David, an agile and lifelike figure depicted in the act of throwing a stone at Goliath. Another magnificent work is Apollo and Daphne by Bernini. And finally, Pluto and Proserpine, again by Bernini. Leaving the museum, we make our way to the Pincio, another beautiful terrace overlooking one of the city's most important squares, Piazza del Popolo. Now we come to the heart of 18th century Rome, the Spanish Steps, leading up to the Church of Trinità dei Monti and the beautiful square, Piazza di Spagna. At the foot of the steps, there is an interesting fountain known as the Barcaccia by Pietro Bernini, father of the more famous Gian Lorenzo. On one side of the Isola Tiberina, the only island in the river Tiber, we can see the Ponte Fabricio Bridge, dating from 62 BC, still almost perfectly preserved. Nearby stands the beautiful church of Santa Maria in Cosmedin. In the portico of the church there is the well-known Bocca della Verità, mouth of truth. According to the legend, this marble effigy of a river god will bite the hand of a liar. In the piazza in front of the church, we can see the well-preserved temple of Fortuna Virile and the circular temple of Vesta, dating from the Augustan age. The vast area known as Campo Marzio was originally open fields. Later it was dedicated to the god Mars and used as a military base and training ground for the Roman legions. Today, one of Rome's most beautiful piazzas is located here, Piazza Navona. In the middle of the piazza stands the monumental fountain of the Four Rivers, designed by Bernini. It is a striking allegory of the four continents then known, with figures representing four rivers, the Nile, Ganges, Danube, and the Rio de la Plata. Near Piazza Navona is Piazza della Rotonda, which gives us a spectacular view of the best preserved building from Imperial Rome, the Pantheon. This building, whose name means all the gods, was erected by Agrippa, son-in-law of Augustus, who dedicated it to all the pagan gods. However, the present-day appearance dates from the time of the Emperor Hadrian, one of the great figures of Roman history. The vast and solemn interior contains the tomb of the great Italian painter Raphael, as well as those of the last kings of Italy. The building has a vast dome of 43 meters in diameter. Even now, it is the world's largest dome in unreinforced concrete, even bigger than that of St. Peter's. However, it was on the banks of the river Tiber that he erected the most impressive building that has survived, Hadrian's Mausoleum. The building was later turned into a fortress, and during the Middle Ages it was given the name of Castel Sant'Angelo, after the miraculous appearance of the Archangel Gabriel to Pope Gregory I, announcing the end of a plague epidemic. During the Middle Ages, the castle was often used as a refuge by the popes in time of danger, and for this reason it was linked to the Vatican by a long covered corridor known as the Passetto. From the highest point of Castel Sant'Angelo, we get one of the best views of the city. The whole scene is dominated by the bulk of St. Peter's and its celebrated dome, which Romans simply call il cupolone, the big dome. St. Peter's Square is an immense oval, constructed in the mid-17th century by Gian Lorenzo Bernini in just 11 years. It has 284 columns set out in 4 rows. The square represents the ideal finishing touch to the basilica, with the 2 semicircles enclosing it like the arms of the Christian church wide open to embrace the people of the world. In the middle stands an obelisk erected in 1585, coming from Nero's circus, which was nearby, where St. Peter had been martyred. The construction of the present basilica began in 1506 under Pope Julius II, and it took over a century to complete it. The interior is so vast and elaborate that it is difficult to comprehend it at first. The whole church is 119 meters long and can hold about 60,000 people. The best-known image of the church is the huge dome designed by Michelangelo, who died before the vaulting of his famous dome was completed. The church contains an austere bronze statue of St. Peter, attributed to the 13th century Florentine sculptor Arnolfo di Cambio. The first chapel on the right contains the most important sculpture in the church, the Pietà by Michelangelo, who produced this sublime masterpiece when he was only 24. From the top of the dome, there is a fine view of the city and the Vatican gardens. The Vatican is the smallest state in the world, and its Renaissance buildings contain an immense treasure of artworks. The Vatican museums, for example, contain some of the most important artistic collections in the world. One of the masterpieces is the Laocoon group of the Rhodes School of Sculpture, dating from the 1st century BC. Then there is the elegant figure of the Apollo of the Belvedere, probably a Roman copy of a bronze sculpture by Leochares, a Greek sculptor of the 4th century BC. The Raphael rooms form part of the papal apartment that Pope Julius II had frescoed by the great artist from Urbino. The masterpieces can be seen in the room of the Segnatura, the dispute over the sacrament, depicting an allegory of religion, in other words, the power of faith. And the renowned School of Athens on the main wall, representing the allegory of philosophy and its basic principles, the idealism of Plato and the practical reality of Aristotle. The most famous and spectacular part is certainly the Sistine Chapel, which takes its name from Pope Sixtus IV, and is the place where the cardinals gather in conclave to elect the new pope. The side walls were decorated by well-known 15th century artists, including Sandro Botticelli. The work called Handing Over the Keys is by Perugino, a work of airy space. But the most impressive part is the decoration of the ceiling vault, frescoed by Michelangelo between 1508 and 1512. The most celebrated scene is the creation of man, where God brings Adam to life. The scene of the creation is surrounded by a host of devout prophets and sibyls. On the wall behind the altar, there is the Last Judgment, which Michelangelo carried out 22 years after the ceiling vault. It took him 7 years to complete this massive work. At the center is the vast figure of Christ the Judge, dominating a tumult of almost 300 naked figures depicted with extraordinary naturalness. On one side, the damned are writhing as they fall down to hell. On the other, the elect rise up to heaven, helped by the angels. The personal drama of Michelangelo is depicted in his self-portrait on the skin of Saint Bartholomew, the saint who was flayed alive. In the figure of Minosse, an artist portrayed Monsignor Biagio da Cesena with donkey's ears, in reply to his criticism of the nudity of the figures.